have done that athletic department, and doing stuff like this is just kind of unprecedented, to say the least. Maybe anywhere, for that matter. I think this is almost unique to any university in the United States. I don't think that this is the kind of stuff that goes on. So thank you very much.
Absolutely.
So my first question was, Mike gets hired, and immediately, you were going to be coming with him. And can you just start off by talking about where your relationship got started and what you were doing for him before?
Yeah, so Mike and I actually first met about 5 years ago. I had grown up around the University of Cincinnati athletics program. I actually started as a basketball manager and camp counselor for Mick Cronin, our friend across town, which is funny how we all ended up in Los Angeles together. But Coach Cronin gave me my start, and I worked at Mick Cronin basketball camps every summer, starting in 7th grade all through high school. And in college, I would come home from Philadelphia's in the summer, and I would spend time around the Cincinnati program again. And the summer after my sophomore year of college, I got an internship with Cincinnati's then athletic director, Whit Babcock, who is now at Virginia Tech. And I had a wonderful summer working for Whit. It was right when we were doing a stadium renovation for football at the University of Cincinnati. We were just starting that process, so I got to really have a seat at the table as that was all unfolding. And then I had planned to come back to intern for him again the summer after my junior year, but in December of my junior year, he got the AD job at Virginia Tech. And I actually remember exactly where I was when that happened and the devastation that I felt, because here was a guy who was a fast riser in the college athletics business who had really taken me under his wing and was going to mentor me. And now he was gone. And I thought too that my internship was gone. And as it turned out, Mike was hired very shortly thereafter to be the next athletic director at Cincinnati. And we got lunch one day. I think I was home for spring break. And we spent an hour together talking about all kinds of things. As you know, with Mike, he's very inquisitive, and he really wants to learn about people and things that are going on. So he asked me a lot of questions about UC and my experiences growing up there as a fan, because he was new and he just wanted to learn. And finally, after about an hour of talking about all of that, he said, by the way, I'm told you had an internship in my office this summer. So, of course, we'll honor that, and I'll see you whenever you show up. So I ended up getting my internship honored just like that, which, as I came to find out later, that's just the kind of guy that Mike is. And we started working together that summer. In my first week there, he said, Brandon, you're going to come to every single meeting. Don't say anything, but you're welcome to be in the room and listen, which for me was an invaluable experience, just learning the language of the business. And it was such an active time for that athletic department in particular, the completion or the start of the football renovation that I had talked about earlier, but a number of other projects too. And so we hit it off right away, and really the rest is history. And when I graduated from college in 2015, he hired me right away, brought me back from the Browns at some point too. And now took me with him to Los Angeles to be a Trojan. So I certainly know that what's been possible in my career is a lot because of Mike. And I'm very loyal and appreciative of him for that.
Yeah, I mean, it seems when we first are introduced to him, it's almost overwhelming. How he, the energy that he exudes is almost can be intimidating.
Yeah.
And, but it's so genuine. It's because you can't fake this for 6-7 months. So the feedback we get from people is that he listens. And I'm curious. You guys there?
I'm here.
We're here. I think we lost Scott. Mark,
okay. Well, no worries. So while Scott's working on his technical difficulties, I was wondering, you're kind of like this modern day Doogie Howser. You really accomplished a lot at relatively young age. So have you had a chance to go back to your local, the Suburban Press, and have them do a retract and give you more than just Brandon Sosna Sr.? You got that fixed yet?
Mark, it looks like you've done your research, huh?
Hey man, you know what's up.
No, I'm glad that joke landed with you, because that was I was really proud of that joke when I wrote it. For those unclear, Mark is referencing my high school graduation speech where the local press couldn't really give me any other accolades as the graduation speaker other than to say that I was a senior, which, I thought was fairly obvious given that it was a, high school graduation speech. But I have not gone back to the Suburban Press, but I'm not too worried. I haven't thought about that in a long time.
Well, the reason why it resonated with me, because you immediately said, see, Dad, funny jokes, and I'm probably your dad's age, so it's kind of right there.
I try to make it relatable to everyone, Mark.
There you go. On that note, though, one of the things you had commented about also was talking in front of large groups. How much have you learned from that, and is it much easier for you now, or are you more comfortable with it?
It's so interesting. It's something that I've always been very comfortable doing. It's something I enjoy doing. Certainly, I hold myself to a high standard in that regard, and always try to be better at it. But I remember being in elementary school and having performances in front of all of the parents and all the other students in the school, and being more than willing to get up there and do my thing and just be comfortable with it. So I would say it's always something that's come relatively naturally to me. I'll leave it up to others as to whether or not I'm any good at it, but certainly I've always been comfortable with it.
Yeah.
What does the chief of staff at USC do? That's the question I get asked.
Yeah, no, it's a common question, and quite frankly, it's something that I even struggle to articulate what I do every day. The reality is that college athletic departments are really unique and very complicated organizations. We have 21 sports, dozens of administrative units, and we also operate within a much larger academic and university ecosystem. So, Mike is making a lot of decisions every day that affect both the department, the campus, and our external constituents like donors and sponsors, fans, alumni. And then we've got an entire internal athletic department to manage as well, with 21 head coaches and 500 plus student athletes. So there are literally thousands of decisions being made every single day in an athletic department, and my job is to help funnel those communications so that everybody understands what's happening and we don't miss anything. And ultimately, Mike is an athletic director who believes in action, and he wants to get things done and get them accomplished. So a big part of my role is ensuring that those things that are important to him get done, and get done at the standard that he expects, and they're followed up on routinely. And at the end of the day, I think the most important thing that I do is, as Mike is making those decisions, you have to understand, for any leader of an organization this size, it's impossible to drill down into every single decision. So ultimately, what I consider my chief responsibility is to make sure that he has all the data and information that he needs to make the best possible decisions that he can for our department.
That's huge.
I was going to say, with a group that big, do you find it more challenging doing the communicating part, getting everybody on the same page, or the listening part, making sure you've got all the info and bringing it back to Mike?
Well, to me, the great thing about listening is it doesn't require any talent. It's just something that you have to be committed to. So, Mike and I have, and really taking Mike's lead, have spent the majority of our first, his 7 months, my first 6 months or whatever, it's been really trying to listen and learn from anyone we can. We don't really discriminate. If you got ideas or experiences, we believe in being idea agnostic, which means we don't care where an idea comes from or who gets credit for an idea. We just want the best ideas. So the great thing about listening is it's just something that you have to be committed to. As far as the communicating, there's always some nuance to that. That's always a challenge. You can never do enough of it. There's always an expectation for more of it. We're constantly trying to be better in that regard. But the really fascinating thing about our experience in particular is that by the time I get back to Los Angeles here, hopefully in the next week or two, I'm back in Ohio with family during the shutdown. I'll spend more time as a Trojan in Cincinnati than I will have in Los Angeles. So layer in being new to a job, but also the complexities of working remotely and all the challenges that we found ourselves facing, both with COVID and things going on in the world. So it's been very, very challenging in that respect.
With all that is going on, the COVID-19 and the Floyd's murder. As an athletic department, what are the priorities? What message? What were the important things that you needed to accomplish with your student athletes?
Well, I think the biggest thing, Scott, and I truly believe it's why Mike Bohn was hired to be the next athletic director at USC, is that he has championed in his career the student-athlete centric leadership model, which means that we operate under a very basic premise and ask ourselves, is this good or bad for the student athlete? And the answer should always be it's good for the student athlete. And when you have a guiding principle like that, it makes a lot of very difficult decisions actually fairly simple, because you have one lens through which you look at those decisions, and that's to understand and make sure that it's the right decision for the student athlete. So really everything we've done over the last 3 months has been geared toward how we can ensure the health, safety, and welfare of our student athletes. And there's an incredible staff in the USC athletic department and the university overall who you don't know, who you probably will never know, but who are working tirelessly each and every day for the student athletes, and they're doing it because they care. And I think that's one of the stories of college athletics that isn't often told. You see all the big media rights deals, and you see the big coaches contracts, but you don't always see the academic support staffer who's working 14 hours a day with back-to-back Zoom meetings to try to ensure that a student athlete is accomplishing their goals academically, or the compliance person that's working each and every day with the student to ensure that they're doing the right things to prepare themselves. And for each of those examples, there are literally dozens of others. And so we're fortunate to have a really, really great staff of folks who are deeply committed to the mission of providing for our student athletes. And so that has really made the last 3 months so much better for us, is that we're just very, very lucky to have joined a department that is already so committed to the student athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You and Mike, seem to work so well together. You're kind of like the Batman, Robin duo, dynamic duo. When you need somebody to lean on and look to for advice, who would be your, for lack of a better term, who would be your Alfred that you would turn to just for some private advice?
That's a great question, Mark. I don't really know that I've spent a lot of time thinking about that. So much of our job is 24/7, and there's not a lot of time to pause and reflect and lean on folks for advice. I've been fortunate to have some mentors in my life who I can call on at any time. But really, to be candid, most of the time I just put my head down and try to do the job and represent Mike and USC the best that I can at all times. Okay,
fair answer. And you touched on it earlier. You both came from Ohio. What is this, USC, UCLA? It's almost like a competition with what you guys are bringing people in from Ohio, from ADs to coaches. Is this just a coincidence, or what's going on here?
Well, I think as much as anything else, it's just a reflection on the incredible work that was being done at the University of Cincinnati under Mike's leadership, with my partnership at times, and certainly in football with Coach Fickle, and in basketball with Coach Cronin, and really across the board in all of the sports at Cincinnati. So I think more than anything else, it's probably a reflection on just all that we accomplished in our time there. I think we became best known for being a program that consistently played above its weight class, which is something that we were extremely proud of. And I would also say that generally speaking, Ohio is an underdog, but we have a lot of pride here, and we're really proud to be where we're from. And Scott, I know you've probably spent some time in Ohio because there's some talented recruiting pools in this area. So Ohio, not to be underestimated.
No, so that's there are states that we want to add. Washington D.C. is one of the 6. That area, is Ohio's one of those top 6.
Definitely, no question.
Absolutely, yes.
USC has a history of a little white collar, so bringing a little bit of that blue collar mentality probably isn't a bad thing. So I'm on the same page. I'm with you.
So this off season was a big one, and for the first question will be, how many additions have you made since Mike arrived at USC?
With respect to the department, or
the athletic
specifically?
Department. The athletic department in general.
I don't know that I could put a number on it. I think in a short time, Mike has done a really good job of leading us to some really positive enhancements in the department, whether it's some things internally that you wouldn't see, or some things with some hires and some individuals that we've supported that have been brought in. But I think, Mike's biggest thing in the first few months that he's been here has really just been about listening and learning and looking for opportunities to make immediate impact where we can in any area. And like I said, he's about getting things done and getting them accomplished, and he doesn't have a lot of patience for things that don't perform to the level that we expect. So he's charged me and the rest of our leadership team in the department to start getting those things accomplished, and I think we're doing that.
When it appeared to me that you guys weren't messing around was, you almost had a defensive coordinator hired that didn't work out, and you ended up with Todd Orlando and Craig Nyber and an entire new defensive staff. Beyond that, too, you hired one of the top recruiters in the nation, and Dante Williams, which, got everybody's attention as well. Chris Claiborne, Hayes Pillard. Who are the people that you guys consult with, to figure out who the top coaches are? And Dante's always wanted to coach at USC, but just that timing was there. But just who are the people that because Mike says he listens to everybody, and I'm just curious who you guys consulted with.
Well, we'll listen to anybody if they know what they're talking about. So we'll take advice from anyone. But with the coaches that you're talking about, this was about Clay Helton, and Clay Helton assembling the staff that he wanted. And our job and what we believe is the role of administration is to serve our programs. And for Clay and rebuilding his staff, really there are two priorities with the staff. The first was to retain the offensive staff. We really valued the stability on that side of the ball. We obviously have a very talented young quarterback who flourished as a freshman in Graham Harrell's system. And so keeping that side of the ball intact was obviously a top priority. And then on the defensive side and special teams, what we talked about with Clay was going out and getting the best staff in the country without any constraints, no limitations, no limits placed on ourselves with our own imagination about who we could get or how we would get them, just that we wanted to get it done. So we took his lead. We supported him however we could to get the coaches that we wanted to. We identified a number of coaches, and we were able to successfully recruit them. And to me, that's what the object of the exercise is to surround ourselves with the best people that we can, who are selflessly committed to winning. And they just have the values that we're trying to build, right? We didn't have to ask them to be a certain way or to say a certain thing when they were talking to the student athletes or talking to the media. There wasn't a list of talking points that we asked them to say to check the box. This is who they are and what they believe. And the best way to affect culture change isn't to hire people and tell them the kind of culture you want to create. It's to hire people who fit the culture that you're trying to create. And Clay did a masterful job doing that. And it was really fun to be part of that process.
Yeah, no, I've been ecstatic with the staff hires since the changes have been coming along. So are there, you don't have to say yes or no, but maybe you can give a wink. Are there any more down the pipe that, USC fans could be looking forward to as far as enhancing, maybe not just the football program, but the athletic department as a whole?
Well, I would say fundamentally, Mark, that the answer is always going to be yes, because for us, everything is always going to be on the table. And if an opportunity presents itself for us to be better, we're going to find a way to make that thing happen so that we can be better. So I think there are still some hires that have yet to be made on our football support staff that we're working toward. But at the end of the day, if an opportunity presents itself for us to get better, it's incumbent upon us to figure that out. Because if that translates to developing our student athletes, providing them a world-class experience, winning football games and doing it with integrity, that's what we're going to be about. That's what we are about. And if there are ways that we can do that better, we're always going to try to do that.
And let me just ask, let's just move on, let's segue into it. The picture behind me, how long have you guys been working behind the scenes to make this finally come to fruition, to open the doors and welcome Reggie home? How long has this been in the making?
Well, I can tell you from Mike's perspective, from day one, there was a lot of conversation about Reggie Bush, and it became very clear to us how much, and not that we didn't know it, but it becomes more personal when you're here and you're having conversations and you start to understand how much Reggie means to the USC community, to our alumni, to our fans. But I think what we were most moved by is how much Reggie means to our former players. And I think what's important about the process that we went through is we had no preconceptions about anything. We had never met Reggie. We had never talked to Reggie. We hadn't talked to a lot of his teammates and our former players. And we didn't feel like it was appropriate for us to think about how somebody should feel about it or what people might think about it. But we were committed to actually understanding what he meant and what he represented. And so when we had a chance to talk to Reggie, we were both blown away by the way that he presented himself and the way that he talked about how much USC meant to him, how much his teammates meant to him, and how important it is to him to be a great role model and an influence for student athletes of the present and the future. And I don't think you can ask for anything more from a former player than to want to be engaged with your program and trying to help the young men and women around the program.
Right. I mean, for all the, for all the past that's associated with it, now having him a part of the fold again, the benefits are just exponential. I mean, I can't even count the ways, but even more so with the whole name, image, likeness thing coming into play. I mean, this just gives USC a tremendous advantage because we can now offer it from both sides of the spectrum. When it wasn't legal, and now it is legal all of a sudden, and how Reggie is just going to be an attraction to all those players in the future.
Yeah, it's amazing how many recruits still talk about what Reggie Bush represents to them, and they don't even remember, weren't even watching him when he was playing at USC because they were too young. And I just think,
and they're not. Sometimes they're defensive linemen too that top down.
Oh yeah, there's no position discrimination when it comes to that, and I just think it speaks to the transcendent meaning of Reggie Bush. But I think it's important to understand that we're not going to ask Reggie to do anything. We hope and we believe that Reggie wants to be an active contributor and actively engage with our program, and we're excited to partner with him on that. But this wasn't about what this benefit was for USC or the benefit was for us in recruiting. It was about what was right for Reggie.
Right. And you know what, I'll just be a matter of fact. First of all, you're not going to have to ask him to do anything. I think he's going to be jumping through hoops to help. But just from, the fan point of view, you know what? So what if the rest of the country has to play catch up now? Dante Williams has said that, we're going to lead. And if having Reggie associate with the program again gives USC a leg up, fight on, man. Who cares? That's my competitive nature speaking. So I know where you're coming from and how you have to say things, but I don't have to say it that way.
And traveling around the country over the last couple of years, I would get feedback from coaches that actually thought USC was broke. USC was not going out and they were not paying for coaches. I know that, there have been coaches like Dave Aranda, for example. USC could have gotten him a couple of times, and Scott Cochran, who was at Alabama. Is it at a point right now to where you have the full support of the President Foltz and where nothing is unattainable within reason? Financially?
I don't know how I'd characterize it, and certainly I don't know a lot about what was happening here before. But I think we all understand what the expectations are from our fans and from our alumni and former players and everyone connected to the program. And we need to perform at that level. And to perform at that level, that championship level that people expect, you have to have championship level resources and support. And I think that we're providing that. And I think we're going to continue to provide that. And we're going to continue to look for more ways to provide more resources that will generate a return. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about having championship level resources. It's also about employing those resources in the right way. And how you deploy those is going to be the difference between winning and losing. So you don't lose the element of strategy as far as how we're deploying those resources to generate the maximum amount of return possible. Because at the end of the day, you're judged on wins and losses. And so we have to do things the right way and ultimately understand what the desired outcomes are.
It's gotta be fun having that bank account, though.
I'm not interested in the bank account.
I'm just saying. Mainly because honestly, I've always felt that with USC, with where it's located, the history and tradition of the program. We're talking about football right now, obviously, because there's national championships won in every sport. But I always felt like if USC went all in financially smart, there's really no way that anybody was going to be able to perform or produce any at a higher level than USC. The sky was the limit. So it's actually fun to watch a program like USC right now, an athletic department, doing what you guys are doing, because you can tell it's not just words. You guys don't have to talk about it. The actions are really a lot louder than our words will ever be.
Well, I think that's what we're about at the end of the day. Is about actions, not words. And we've seen what it can be like here before. And to me, this is the preeminent college athletics program in the country. And we are deeply committed to ensuring that we sustain that and achieve that. And the mission to make the Trojan family proud is deeply personal to us.
Yeah, to try and tie something together, and if I don't ask this question, I'll get killed by the board members on our site. With the whole Title IX and scholarship distributions, you touched on resources, and Scott had brought up USC having the treasure chest to afford things. What are the challenges with USC having a women's softball team or a men's soccer team, getting those types of things started within the athletic department? Because as mentioned, the surrounding resources, it's there. It's not like USC has to look far to fill the rosters for either one of these teams. So maybe you can go into depth of how Title IX works and how it affects everything.
Well, I'll say this with respect to adding sports, and to be honest, in our first 6 to 7 months, that's not really something that we've contemplated. And certainly right now with everything going on in the world and the challenges that we're facing with potential revenue gaps with what might happen with the football season, I don't know that we're in a position to have those conversations right now. Again, I think we're open to everything, but when it comes to adding sports, there are many complexities associated with that. Title IX is certainly a consideration that is deeply important, both in terms of what it means to the NCAA and but just us in terms of our values. There's also facility considerations and concerns that you have to contemplate. There are spatial challenges that you have to consider as far as locker rooms and where folks are housed and offices. And so there's a whole plan that would have to be generated for those things to go into effect. So deeply complicated matters for sure, and not something that we've contemplated to this point.
Right. And so Jake Hackus, there you go. There's the answer.
Well, we have to ask specifically, could you potentially add softball at some point? Now the question's been asked.
I would never rule anything out, but again, not something that we're contemplating at the time.
I figured that much.
Are you guys trying to make a renewed emphasis on the tradition of the baseball program? It's been a while since they've been competitive, and how, again, going back to the scholarship limitations, how do we work around that? What are some of the ideas you guys have been coming up with to help get the roster filled and be more competitive, I guess is the best way to put it.
One of my favorite things so far since coming to USC has been getting to know Coach Gill and spending some time with him and getting to know who he is and what he's about as a baseball coach. And I think I was at almost every single home game that we had before the outbreak of a global pandemic. And I was extremely excited by the way that the guys were playing, by the wins that we were having, the success that we were having. And so I think the biggest thing in the success of any program is the head coach at the end of the day. And so, Jason's been phenomenal so far. We're really excited to work with him. We're going to keep supporting him. I think the university's commitment on financial aid to certain demographics and household incomes under $80,000 a year could be a factor. But it's impossible not to sit at our baseball games and not look out at the fence and see the incredible history and tradition and all the accolades. And that's where we want to be. And I think it's just a tenet of being at USC that you want to win championships and compete at the highest level in all 21 sports, because we're one of the few programs that really has the capacity to do that. And that's the objective.
What are some of being at USC, I went to UCLA, but USC, I always feel good when I walk on that campus. I don't know. I feel good when I go on UCLA's campus too, but I'm on USC's more often. There's just something about the place. I think it's a lot to do with the people that are a part of that university, but and everybody at least within the football program. I've just not seen a group of guys that have seemed like they're generally enjoy working with each other and having a great time. And I'm wondering, what has maybe, I know you had interest in USC, but what are some of the things that you've experienced at USC that, even in this short period of time, that will last forever?
Wow. Well, it's funny for me, growing up in Cincinnati, Anthony Munoz I actually have a statue of him sitting over here somewhere. Anthony Munoz is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, Cincinnati Bengal of all time. And my quarterback growing up as a Cincinnati Bengals fan was Carson Palmer, and he was my favorite player. And I wanted to go to USC, not because I really knew that much about USC, but because Carson Palmer was my favorite player. And during my formative years, it seemed like USC was going undefeated every year, just about. So it made a really strong impression on me. And I've always had an affinity for USC. And I'm still amazed that things happened in my life that resulted in me having the incredible fortune of being able to call myself a Trojan, because there was a time where it was my dream school, and I had signed a contract with my dad that I would go there. And it's amazing that this winding road has led me to Los Angeles, which frankly is a place I never really thought that I wanted to live, because I'm just a typical Midwestern kid from Ohio. But you're right. It's an enormously special place. The power of the Trojan family is really, there are no superlatives that exist to define it. And I've been so impressed by the passion of the fan base, the knowledge of the fan base, their dedication and commitment and support of the Trojans. It's awesome. I've been blown away. And it's in the 6 weeks when Mike was here that I wasn't, he would call me when he could. Obviously he was very busy, and so I would try to communicate with him when I could, but I understood that he had work to do, and we were in different time zones, and frankly I had work to do where I was. But he said, Brandon, whatever your expectations are for USC, multiply them by 100, because that's what it's really like out there. And that's been my experience so far, for sure.
Wow, that's pretty cool to hear, man.
That is cool.
Yeah, and one of the things I've noticed is the emphasis that you guys have been putting on and kind of bringing that Trojan family back together again, trying to close that circle, because it was kind of fragmented. And one of the ways you've been doing that is that I've noticed lately has been also with the basketball program. There was kind of a little, social media push there recently with Sam Clancy coming back in. You're a huge basketball fan, as am I. First of all, can you explain why Tom Crean chewed you out at the basketball camp? I'd never heard why he yelled at you. But also, what are your plans for the basketball program to bring it back on par, or maybe not to the level of the football, but so the fans want to get out there as much as watching the football program?
Yeah, well, to answer the first question, Tom Crean chewed me out. These were back in the days when colleges were allowed to host AAU tournaments and camps and apparel company camps and all those different things on campuses. So we had an Adidas camp that we would host at Cincinnati every single year, and it was a big time tournament. It was a big weekend. We were working 6 a.m. to midnight every single day. All of the coaches were there. There was a time I rode up in an elevator with Coach K on my right and Roy Williams on my left. And there was a time where Tom Crean chewed me out because he was standing in a restricted area where coaches were not allowed to stand. And he was not a fan of the seating that was permissible. And for whatever reason, I drew the short straw of having to be the one to go tell Coach Crean that he couldn't stand there anymore. I was probably 14, maybe 15 years old at the time. And he didn't take too kindly to that. He made it very clear that the seating alternatives that were permissible were not of interest to him. And so I don't really recall how it went or where it ended, but I do remember getting yelled at by him. And as far as the basketball program at large, Mark, I think what we all experienced in that final home game of the year against UCLA, to me, that's the vision of what our program is going to be about, the type of energy and momentum that's behind it, the kind of support that the program is receiving and the way that we market it and brand it and generate excitement for it. I think at the end of the day, you can make anything a priority in the way that you emphasize it. And for us, our basketball programs of both men's and women's are going to be a priority. We want to win. Obviously, we want to win in everything we do. Mike talks about this a lot, but if there's a metric by which we keep score, the object is for us to win. And we have all of the tools that we need to have an elite men's basketball program. And I've really enjoyed working with Andy in the time that we've been together. We've collaborated a lot on a number of different things that we're going to work on long-term that are going to continue to fuel the growth of our basketball program. But I think everybody will remember the feeling that they had inside Galen when Jonah hit that shot. It was electric. And to me, there's no reason why that can't be the norm rather than the exception. And that's a vision. And that's what we're going to work toward. And we're going to pursue it relentlessly. And we want to win consistently. And that's the expectation. Mike and I come from a place where we've been to 9 straight NCAA tournaments. We enjoy that. And we're going to do what we need to do to support Andy so that can be what we do every year as well.
Okay, I remember watching those Cincinnati teams with, when Bob Huggins was coaching them, and the ass whooping they put on USC back there. I mean, Cincinnati had a really impressive basketball program, and I've always wanted to see that on a consistent level at USC, and I think that's all we're looking for as a fan base, is just the consistency. So it's nice to know that you and Mike share that same vision as well.
As the weeks have gone by, and even during this two-plus month break or stoppage that we've had, there's been a lot of momentum at USC, and whether it's recruiting, whether it's football hirings. But one thing that Mark and I noticed, and I think a lot of people noticed, was Willie McGinnis was with Mike quite a bit at the end of the football season. And it just kind of seems like more and more, like Mark said, former players are starting to get involved. Matt Leinart was walking down the steps of the Downey parking structure, and that was like the 3rd time I had seen him in a short period of time. And I said, "Hey, man, what are you doing here?" He goes, "I'm going to be here all the time." And so there's a lot of that going. Were some of these players reaching out to you guys at some point?
Yeah, we've heard from so many former players. We've reached out to so many former players. I had an opportunity to be at the Rose Bowl, and I was on the sideline and was lucky to get introduced to Matt and Keyshawn and some others. And we've had donor events where we've had Matt Barkley and Mark Sanchez and Brandon Hancock and Frosty Rucker. We can go on. And the number of guys who have come to basketball games in the time that we were there, who were sitting courtside or around. So it's been awesome. I mean, getting to know those guys has been tremendous. It is clear the passion that they still have for USC and the expectations that they have for USC. And the thing that struck me the most is that they all want USC to be the best USC it can be. And they're all willing to do whatever they have to do to help us get there. And we're excited about that. We want to see them on the sideline at games. We want them to be as active as they possibly can be with our program and supporting our student athletes. So that's been one of the really exciting things that's happened in the last 6 to 7 months, is just the number of former players that we've heard from who have reached out or been around and really made a point to build a relationship. Because at the end of the day, Mike and I are about relationships, and to build strong ones with our former players is critically important. And I think a lot of that comes down to the foundational belief that Mike has and we share about what it really means to run an athletics department, because it's not our program. This program belongs to the former players, the current players, the players of the future, the fans, the alumni, the donors, and everyone who grew up absolutely loving USC. It belongs to them, and it's our job to represent them. And that extends to our former players in a very big way. And that's a huge responsibility to uphold their legacy that they created and that they built, because USC is what it is today because of all those who came before us. And it's our job to carry that torch forward. And we take that extremely seriously.
Was there, it seemed just in conversations I've had that, the support of the football program, forget the former players, had seemed to waned a little bit too. Was it a priority for you? Did it take some work to maybe reach out to some of the people that have supported this program over the years that maybe had cooled a little bit? Was there a process of that also?
Yeah, there was. Mike's been extremely active in that regard. And what we found, just like with our former players, is that everybody wants to help. Everybody shares the desire to make the USC the best USC that it can be. And so we've been really inspired by the outpouring of support that we've received from, like we talked about, former players, but also there, like any program, there are a number of donors and supporters that really help make the student athlete experience at USC possible. And so reaching out to those folks and engaging them and making sure they understand how important they all are to our success has been a huge priority.
Well, Mark's going to want to ask some probably better questions than I am, but this is almost kind of like, I'm curious because the gentleman that was going to join us tonight that was unable to was somebody that he was texting me like, man, I'm going to stop paying my whatever for my suite and all this kind of stuff, to where he is all in. And it's impressive to be able to do that in a short period of time. So, kudos to you guys for pulling that off.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most rewarding aspects so far for us has been the number of folks like that who expressed some frustrations in December, who were clear with us that the expectations were that we would perform better, and those same people started to come around, and they believe in the vision of what we're building and where we're going. And so that's been really exciting, the number of people who have been affected by that. And I think it speaks to just the tremendous passion that our donors and our fans and our alumni have for USC. And like I said, the mission to make them proud is deeply personal for us. It's a big responsibility to deliver for them, and that's what we intend to do.
Yeah, one of the tenets, at least for me, is always has always been watching USC compete at the highest level, whether it's in conference or out of conference scheduling. And one of the things I've noticed with the competition going on is you guys are making it fun again internally. With the football program, they have the offensive lineman, defensive lineman, big man cook-off. Are you guys doing anything internally inside Heritage Hall amongst yourselves to make the competition a little fun between yourselves? And if you lose something, Brandon, how do you process a loss? I mean, do you punch a wall? How do you get through it so you don't lose again?
I don't lose well. I'll be honest. I don't lose well. I think what makes some people special and great coaches is that they possess a rare degree of competitiveness where losing actually affects their being. It's not a thing that just happens. It's something that affects you deeply and personally. And I'm wired that way. I think I hate to lose much more than I even love to win. And so we both, Mike and me, are extremely competitive in everything. And it extends to everything for us. I mean, there's no love lost when competitions come about between us. And we've been pleased with what the football program's been doing internally, whether it's cookouts or other accountability competitions that they've had that have been great, because culture is so important. We've done our own things with our athletic staff, even as we've worked remotely with trivia nights and staff surveys where you find out all kinds of different things about each other, and just trying to do some things to keep it light during a difficult time, but also learn more about each other. And it will be a tenet of our culture that we are going to be highly competitive about everything that we do. And it's just who we are.
Yeah. And I think that's, the way I like to, kind of bring the questioning out, as you said. It's always felt like there was this wall between the fan base and the people who run USC. And I appreciate your candor and lowering that wall and letting people in and saying, you're a real person, and we laugh and we cry and we get pissed off too, just like you guys do, and you're not afraid to admit it. Because in the past, it kind of was like, what, this is who we are, deal with it. And as Scott mentioned, there's been a change in the culture. I've spoken about it at length in the past, and I love what you guys are doing. So just whatever formula you guys are cooking up, just continue with it.
Well, thanks, Mark. I mean, the reality is we don't have all the answers. We don't have the institutional knowledge that our staff and our media and our donors and fans and alumni have about USC. I can promise you that when Mike Bone arrived and when I arrived, we had no idea that we were one of 3 programs in the country who've never played an FCS opponent. And that became important to us because it was important to our fans, and they let us know it. And that's why we took the actions that we did, because we did come in with the philosophy that we weren't going to play FCS programs. We learned that that was an important tenet of what USC is about. And so we acted accordingly. I think what's most important, Mark, is that when people give as much as they do to USC, and I'm not talking about just their resources, I'm talking about time and emotional investment. If they don't believe that the people who are responsible for leading the program care as much or as more as they do, then what's the point? And so it's really important to us that our fans and everyone that cares about USC knows that the people running their program, like Mike Bone and our coaches and our staff, care as much as they do. And whatever we have to do to communicate to them that that's where we are and that's what we're about and that's who we are, that's what we're going to do. Because I say this all the time, but how many people on Twitter and Instagram or wherever they are, when they have a bio, they talk about how they're a USC fan. You have 200 characters to define who you are to the world, and you choose to just note that you're a fan of something. It's a really sacred responsibility to lead that thing that somebody considers so fundamental to their identity and who they are. And if they don't believe that we care as much as they do, I don't know how you ever keep their support. And so we wear it on our sleeves. You'll see me jumping up and down on sidelines. You'll hear Mike yelling from the stands. And it's because we want to, we both intentionally want to mirror the passion of our fans, but it's also who we are.
Right. And like I said, that's been missing for so long. And it's been so easily to recognize the difference. And that's not saying that the previous staffs were wrong. It's different. And a lot of us have been asking for different for a long time. So it's working. So there's nothing to be ashamed of. I enjoy seeing you and Mike jumping around on the sidelines and the baseline when Jonah's shot is swishing through the basket. So the fans do too.
We'll just try not to get thrown out of any games.
I'll do that.
Yes, good move. Hey, I got to ask the Cleveland Browns question, like I told you I would.
All right.
Well, my first question would be, was Baker Mayfield the right choice?
I believed Baker Mayfield was the right choice at the time. I obviously have a newfound allegiance to Sam Darnold, so I'm not really sure that I want to answer how I feel right now. But I learned so much from that process and the perspective that I gained, because we put thousands and thousands of hours into studying Baker and all the other quarterbacks. And I grew up as a diehard football fan, and the draft was always my favorite weekend of the year. And I would watch just like everyone else and say, that was a great pick and that was a terrible pick, and what were you thinking? And the perspective that I gained that I think is so valuable, that I think should extend both to our industry and any industry, is that when somebody else lives it and does it every day, there should be some recognition of the fact that they probably have information and an understanding and data and perspective that you don't. And so there was a lot that went into the selection of Baker at the time. For us, it was actually a unanimous decision in our front office. And John Dorsey, our general manager, I think is really is one of the elite talent evaluators in football and really ever in the history of the game. And I consider him a dear friend and mentor to this day. I'm sorry that it didn't work out for him in Cleveland, but this is the same guy that a few years before drafted Pat Mahomes in Kansas City. So he knows what he's doing. He knows how to evaluate quarterbacks. And like anything else, I think this is a critical year for all of everyone in that class. So we'll see.
There was a lot of speculation at the time when USC had the pro day. Hugh Jackson was at SC. The owner was sitting in the stands at the track stadium. Everybody thought when they left it was Sam Darnold. What was it close? Was it at that time? Maybe in April was Sam Darnold the guy, or was with Hugh? Because I walked the parking lot with Hugh. He's like, we haven't decided at all. This is a process. We're still going through it.
It was a wire-to-wire decision, I think, with Baker. That same treatment we gave to every one of the projected first-round quarterbacks that year, as far as the large contingency that we had and the presence that we had at each of their pro days. Certainly, we didn't want to indicate one way or another the direction that we were going for strategic and competitive reasons. But my understanding and having a front row in the process was that it was Baker from day one, and everything that occurred from the start of that process to the end of it was just more confirmation that Baker was the guy for us.
Well, I'm going to go back and find all the articles that were claiming Darnold was number one, and I'm going to remind all those people.
I will say that we really did get a kick out of that in Cleveland, because there was just this media groupthink that emerged that Sam was the guy, and he definitely wasn't going to be. And so we found that to be very interesting, very humorous, because it is pretty rare nowadays that the first overall pick occurs and everybody's surprised by it. It's usually pretty obvious leading up to the day. And so, there's definitely some fun in the shock value when I think 99% of the population expected that Sam was going to be the pick.
Well, that must have been a
now
shock value.
If I see Sam, wherever you are, whenever you're around, just know that, you're my guy.
How
it had
often
to be a little bit of a shock value with learning that Clay Helton was fired also.
I don't know.
You didn't see the article,
that.
apparently.
I don't know anything about that.
I was just going to say, how often are you ever going to see the word Cleveland trend on Twitter? So if that made it happen by drafting Baker Mayfield. So.
Well, we tried it a lot when we were there because we were wheeling and dealing. So that was a fun time period for the Browns.
Right. So,
but that was a good draft.
It was a great draft. That was Baker Mayfield and Denzel Ward and Nick Chubb. I mean, those are three cornerstones right there.
You were in
future GM of the Browns right here.
So, during this whole time, during this pandemic, you've been away from USC. Have you learned anything about yourself?
I think I'm always learning about myself. I've been working with a leadership coach since I was 17 and have always been deeply committed and invested in my own growth and development. I would say the biggest thing that I've had an opportunity to do while working remote has been building relationships. I've been very lucky during this time to get connected to a lot of people in our business, outside of our business. I'll get random messages from somebody I know in the industry, an agent or a coach or a media member who says, hey, I have somebody that you should meet. And, I'll reach out and set up a Zoom. But one of the things that I also really like to do, really to a fault, is I get a lot of people who will email me, reach out, LinkedIn, social media, whatever, who are young and ambitious and want to get into the sports industry. And I never decline those. So I've spent hours and hours and hours during this quarantine having Zoom sessions with young sports professionals all over the country talking about how they can grow and paths that they can take. And so that's something that I also really enjoy. And I've been fortunate to have a different type of schedule where I've had an opportunity to do that. And being on the East Coast, my day doesn't really start until 11:30 when they get going on Pacific time. So I've had an opportunity in the morning to do a lot of different things that have contributed to my own growth and development during this time.
I know of one particular viewer of this episode who's going to find your comment on that very interesting. I'll make sure they listen to this because it'll highlight what they've been thinking. So when you do come back to LA, what's your favorite eatery and where are you going?
So funny story about that. I got to LA the day after the Holiday Bowl and moved right into the USC hotel where I was living up until the quarantine. Right. And I don't have a car in LA. I was spending all my time on campus. I was eating at all the on-campus restaurants or in Little Galen. And finally, Mike said, "Brandon, you're getting off campus. I'm going to take you and go somewhere." So he takes me downtown to El Cholo, and we had a good dinner at El Cholo, and I understand that it's an LA establishment, and it was a fine experience. So that was good. I got off campus, got a meal. I spent a lot of time in the office. It was nice to get away. And I don't know, maybe a week or two later, some of the guys on the football support staff said, "Hey, Brandon, we're gonna go grab some food. You should come with us." And I was like, "No, I got things to do." And they really put the pressure on me. They recruited me, if you will, to go to dinner with them. So I was like, fine. So I walk outside and I get in the car. I didn't even ask, where are we going? What are we doing? What's going on? We started driving and we're going, and I'm not paying attention. We're talking. It was actually the first time that I met Drew Fox. So I was getting to know Drew a little bit. And all of a sudden we pull up to a restaurant. And I was like, I recognize this place. It's El Cholo. So I went out twice. I went out to meals twice when I was in LA for the first two times, and I went to the same place both times in a city that's got like 1 billion restaurants. Somehow I managed to find the same place twice. So I guess you could say that I've developed somewhat of an affinity for El Cholo, but I had a really unique experience with one of our donors who was kind enough to take me to Taylor Steakhouse, which I understand to be a well-established location in Koreatown. Had a chance to go to a couple steakhouses in Manhattan Beach that were great. So I will say the USC 15 hit me pretty early on because we had so many donors and alumni and fans who were so eager to treat me to nice dinners, and I couldn't say no. And so I found myself going to all these steak dinners and nice restaurants. And when you go do that, you got to enjoy yourself.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, where are you going to be moving back to the USC hotel? usually the people that work at USC in the athletic department or the coaches, they move to South Bay. You picked out a location to buy a house or whatever you're going to do?
Yeah, I found a great situation for myself in an on-campus apartment. So I won't be at USC Hotel anymore, but I will be on campus and found a great spot for me. So my movers in Ohio packed up my stuff yesterday, and sometime in the next 10 to 12 days, I'm going to be on my way back to Los Angeles. So I'm eager to get back, eager to see Heritage Hall again, eager to see those Heisman trophies in the lobby and be around all those people. So I'm excited to get back and get going. And obviously there's a number of safety and health protocols that we'll have in place whenever it is that we can get back to the office. But to the extent that it'll be normal again, I'm excited to be back in Heritage Hall because it's a special place.
Yeah, can't wait to see you guys back as well.
I wanted to also ask you, have you been to Dodger Stadium?
I have not yet been to Dodger Stadium. I saw it in the distance, but that's my only Dodger Stadium experience so far. I had circled, I'm a huge Cincinnati Reds fan. I pretty much watch 162 games a year. I find a way, although I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do that with the time changes because games starting at 4 o'clock doesn't exactly work. But my junior year of high school, I think I went to 61 out of 81 Reds home games that year. It was the first year of my life that they ever made the playoffs. So I enjoyed it. I would get tickets on StubHub. I got to know the ushers and would find myself a decent seat for a ticket I bought for $5. So I had circled the dates that the Reds were going to be in town playing the Dodgers, but obviously things are what they are. So we'll see. I'll try to get out there at some point.
Let me do something for you. Johnny Bench, I'll say Don Gullett, Tony Perez, Joe Morgan, Dave Concepcion, Pete Rose, Ken Griffey Jr., Cesar Geronimo, and George Foster.
There you go. Look at that. Big red machine right behind you.
I was a huge fan. I kid you not. My
it.
dad used to go back with the Dodgers to Cincinnati for series, and my favorite story was Pete Rose going 2 for 10 in a doubleheader and then having batting practice for 3 hours after.
That sounds like his brand. Yeah. Absolutely. That's great. Awesome. Those Reds-Dodgers games back in the day, those were big time.
They were. I mean, I
with Pedro Borbone on the mound.
My Cincinnati sports fandom has been nothing but a Greek tragedy. The Bengals haven't won a playoff game in my lifetime. The Reds haven't advanced past the first round of the playoffs in my lifetime. So as a fan, I've been a tortured soul, which is big reason why I wanted to come to USC because it's a place where you can win championships, and I haven't had a chance to do that yet either as a fan or as a professional, and that's the goal.
So as far as professional basketball, you're not a Cavaliers fan?
It would have been easy to get on the bandwagon when LeBron James arrived, but I've always been a college basketball first guy. I've always enjoyed watching the NBA come playoff time. But never had a team, never really, to me, being a fan is an emotional connection to something.
Absolutely.
You have to build a firewall around emotion when you're in an athletic department and making decisions because you really can't ever let emotion affect any of your decisions. But as a fan, I'm as emotional as anyone. And I couldn't find it with an NBA team and I couldn't really generate it. It didn't feel really authentic for me. So just stuck to being a casual NBA fan.
All right. Well, you are in LA, so eventually you're gonna have to pick one or the other.
Well, I enjoyed seeing LeBron when I was in Cleveland. We were there for a year together. I say together, but we were there at the same time, I should say, for a year. So I look forward to seeing him again because watching him in person is it's quite a spectacle.
He's 6'10", 270 for crying out loud.
It almost does him a disservice that he's on an NBA floor because the athleticism in that regard just doesn't quite stand out as much as if he were on a football field and he were in that size with those kind of movement abilities. It would be something to behold.
He would have been a 4 or 5 star tight end.
Yeah.
He played
the exact same thing to Daniel Utome earlier this year, or during the basketball season. I was like, have you ever thought about playing football?
Ethan Anderson too, man.
Yeah, he looks like a running back. I mean, just
those guys have NFL bodies.
Yeah. Love what Andy Enfield and his staff are putting together over there. So
Two more questions for me.
All right.
I'm going to ask one. You want to ask another one, Mark, and then I'll ask it.
No, I think I'm boring the heck out of Brandon, so you go ahead.
Probably the opposite. But you're a competitive guy, and so what comes with that is constantly raising the bar. How do you challenge yourself?
Well, I think the job creates the challenges for us. So a lot of it comes from just the ebbs and flows of the day-to-day. And I think the thing that I love most about college athletics and what drew me back from the NFL, one, obviously, is that there's just a deeper purpose to what we do in college athletics and supporting the student-athlete experience and the impact that we make on so many young lives. And that to me, I miss that when I wasn't a part of it, because it just gives you a sense of pride in what you do. But the other, there's something new every single day. And that's really one of the things that I cherish most about my role is if I had 1 hour meetings for 9 hours consecutively in a day, I'm probably meeting with 9 different elements of our athletic department. And it just seems like every day there's something new and different, some challenge that arises that we couldn't have anticipated. And so that feeling of always having to be on your toes, that just excites me about the job. I don't know that I could do this if it wasn't constantly challenging me in ways that really test who we are and what we're about.
Yeah.
And my last question was, how closely do you follow the recruiting part on all the sports?
Very closely. I mean, at the end of the day, when it comes to wins and losses, a lot of that is determined by the student athletes. And so I follow it very closely. I pay attention to everything that's going on in the recruiting world to the extent that I can. I'm very close with the football recruiting staff. Obviously, we spent a lot of time together as we've tried to enhance that recruiting operation. Obviously, philosophically, Mike and I believe that you hire coaches to do the job, and their recruiting is one of the central components of that job. So we don't get involved in it, but certainly we like to be aware of it. And I always enjoy getting a text from Coach Helton when we've got some good news.
Yeah, I don't get those texts.
I'll see if I can talk to him about that. I'll set up automatic forwarding, Scott.
There you go.
Yeah, that would be a beautiful thing. If we could actually do that, that would be a service I would pay for. No, but I do want to ask about Clay Helton because he was just crucified last season, maybe even the season. I'll tell you what, I'm going to be long-winded on my last question, but after the Pac-12 championship a few years ago, the first question that Lynn Swann was asked was, is Clay Helton's job safe? I mean, I looked over, I was like, they just won the Pac-12 championship. But so he was crucified last year really, really hard, but you guys have faith in him. Just what do you see from Clay Helton?
Well, I think first and foremost, everything that everybody says about Clay Helton, the person, is true. I mean, he is an extremely rare individual in the coaching world as far as who he is as a person, the respect that he has for people, the way that he treats people. He is as fine of a human being as I've ever been around, and he's the type of person that you really want to support because of the way that he treats you and treats people. And I've been blown away by the person that he is and the relationships that he has with his student athletes, and just in general the way that he carries himself. And at the end of the day, he understands what the expectations are. 13 and 12 over the last 2 years is not where we want to be. And it's our job to provide him the support and the resources that he needs to win at the level that we all expect. And that's what we're all committed to.
Well, hey, again, I just want to tell you that this was a big deal for us. And we want to let you know how greatly we appreciate you coming on and spending an hour with us. And also, just to repeat myself, it's a lot of fun to watch what's going on right now. I mean, you don't even have to be a USC fan or cover this football team. The entire country is taking notice, and so that's just fun because you do have a bunch of great people that are working for you.
Well, I appreciate it, Scott. You guys are extremely passionate, and we appreciate what you do and telling the story of our student athletes and our program in ways that we can't. So thank you.
All right. Well, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, just to have the media on your side and And it seems like everybody's just pushing in the same direction again. And I think, again, they're following the lead that's starting at the top with Mike, with yourself, and it's just working its way down. So, again, the formula you guys are using, it's working. Just maintain it, and, you know, the next time you lose, we'll come down on you. But until then, you know, you're doing a great job. Thank you.
All's fair. We've only just begun.
All right. Hey, hopefully we'll see you soon.
Likewise.